Reinhardt was in a bad mood. Despite being promoted to admiral and soon to inherit the title of Count von Lohengrin, joining the ranks of the high nobility, the horizon of his heart was clouded. The thought of his sister's gentle the thought of his sister's gentle white hand being placed on the forehead of an undeserving man turned even the vibrant spring sunlight into part of a monochrome painting. When Kaiser Frederick IV fell ill, Anna Rose stayed in the sick room to nurse him, and when Reinhardt and Kircheis visited her residence in the palace, the butler told them, with formal but empty politeness, that she was not there. A pond spread out in front of his sister's residence, with a linden tree casting a deep shadow. The two of them lay on the grassy lawn in silence, staring up at the sky. Suddenly, Reinhardt placed his hands on the grass and, with a small grunt, did a handstand. An admiral of the Imperial fleet doing a handstand on the lawn? A surprised Kircheis laughed, and Reinhardt, still in this handstand position with his luxurious golden hair brushing the grass, retorted, "It's a great feeling to defy gravity. You should try it." But his expression suddenly changed, and he quickly corrected the upside-down scene reflected in his eyes. "Sister!" Reinhardt gracefully flipped back onto his feet, while Kircheis literally jumped up to his full height. The scenery regained its vibrant colors, and within it, Anna Rose's gentle smile softly shone. "You've both grown up and succeeded, yet in some ways you're just the same as before," she said. "That's unfair, sister," Reinhardt replied. "Oh? How so, Reinhardt? I'm able to hold a handstand for much longer now." No matter how you looked at it, this was not a statement befitting a high-ranking officer of the Imperial fleet. If those who viewed Reinhardt as an arrogant blonde brat with unruly ambition and an insolent attitude had seen this, they would have been unable to suppress their sense of bewilderment. But to Siegfried Kircheis, this was how things should be. As long as the three of them were together, there was no need for power, military might, or even ambition. Sometimes, Kircheis would imagine that he was walking through the corridors of a long dream. When he woke up, he would find himself lying next to Reinhardt on a bed with white, clean sheets, and a blonde girl would open the door and greet them with a smile like sunlight filtering through the trees. "I informed your parents last night. After breakfast, you two should head to school." The red-haired boy would answer, "I had a dream. The two of us became soldiers and boarded a space battleship. We defeated the enemy and returned home in triumph." But that was the voice of reality. Whether externalized or kept hidden inside, the deep disappointment was something Anna Rosa had anticipated. She handed them a basket and told them it contained potato pancakes. Please come visit again soon. Until then, take care of yourselves. That's all I ask. You too, sister. Please don't overexert yourself. As Lord Reinhardt says, please take care of your health. Each word carried 100-fold the weight of their emotions. Holding the basket, filled with the highest reward from their recent battle, Reinhardt and Kircheis left the shade of the linden tree. Klaus, the Marquis von Lichtenlade, was a 74-year-old man with eyes that were more severe than sharp, and he had held the position of Minister of State for 10 years. Before that, he had served as Minister of the Interior, Minister of the Imperial Household, and Minister of Finance, fulfilling these roles without major missteps. In the vast and sluggish imperial bureaucracy, which had become as oversized and lethargic as a herbivorous dinosaur, without major missteps was an important achievement. The Marquis von Lichtenlade had never established new policies or laws. He was well versed in customs and old practices and skillfully applied them according to the situation, sometimes sprinkling in His Majesty the Kaiser's opinion as an added spice to handle affairs. Though he harbored strong desires and attachment to power, he masked it well, which allowed him to maintain his current position and authority. Some saw through this, but all of them had been driven out of the court by the Margrave's clever machinations. Now, his only real rivals were the two grand nobles who were the Kaiser's sons-in-law. The Marquis von Lichtenlade thought, "The influence of Duke Braunschweig and Marquis von Littenheim, the Kaiser's sons-in-law, must not be allowed to grow any further. Their abilities and interests are more suited to hunting and feasting, and if they meddle in state affairs, it will only lead to unnecessary confusion and strife." Reinhardt's sister, Anna Rose, who held the title of Countess von Grunwald, did not meddle in politics, despite the Kaiser's overwhelming favor toward her. This was a welcome fact among the courtiers, and her personal reputation was not bad among them. Even Lichtenlade had no issue with her. However, if the modest Anna Rose were to bear a son and be officially installed as Kaiserin, she might interfere in state affairs, as countless examples in history had shown. The question remained, how should they deal with her in the future? The Galactic Empire was a despotic state, where the sacred and inviolable will of the Kaiser stood above all laws. Courtiers and favored mistresses who had held power under one Kaiser were often expelled from the court when a new Kaiser ascended the throne. Sometimes, power even took lives along with it. One could not contemplate the situation deeply enough. Since the death of Crown Prince Ludwig, Kaiser Frederick IV had no male heir. Of his 9 siblings, one had been granted death, one had died in an accident, and the remaining 7 had died of illness. The Kaiser himself had impregnated 16 women, including the Kaiserin, 28 times. 6 resulted in miscarriages, 9 in stillbirths, and of the 12 children who were born, 9 died before reaching adulthood, and 2 died after reaching adulthood. The only surviving children were Amelie, the wife of Duke Braunschweig, and Christine, the wife of Margrave von Littenheim. The lack of a direct male heir made future predictions difficult. There was a grandson, but he was only 4 years old, and since his mother did not come from a noble family, there were concerns about how the grand aristocrats might react. If Anna Rose were to give birth to a son, the Kaiser, who doted on her, would likely name that child the Crown Prince. After 9 years in the harem, her failure to conceive was probably due to the Kaiser's own issues. Miscarriages, stillbirths, and premature deaths were not uncommon. Over the past 5 centuries, with some exceptions, the blood of the Golden Bomb dynasty had become tainted, and their vitality had weakened, the inevitable consequence of their excesses. Although the common people did not know this, the birth rate of congenital deformities and abnormal offspring had risen significantly. All such unfortunate children were euthanized by the court physicians. Kaiser Rudolph, the founder of the dynasty, had openly declared, "The socially or physically weak have no right to live." Along with the Republicans, he had slaughtered the deformed, the abnormal, the mentally weak, the physically disabled, and those with hereditary diseases, people who bore no personal responsibility for their conditions. Ironically, his descendants had given birth to those who have no right to live, and had compounded the evil of infanticide in order to maintain the prestige and dignity of the imperial family. If so, one might assume that Anna Rose's chances of giving birth to a son were slim. But there was one more factor concerning her. Her brother, Reinhard von Musel. At 19 years old, to be made an admiral was excessive favoritism from the Kaiser. Yet that golden-haired boy did not seem like just an empty satellite orbiting the Kaiser. Even in the recent Third Battle of Tiamat, though Marshal Muckenberger had expressed dissatisfaction and reluctance, he did not oppose Reinhardt's promotion to admiral. "Perhaps it's because he didn't want to incur His Majesty's displeasure," said Viscount Gerlach, the Minister of Finance and a close confidant of Lichtenlade. The old politician, though he thought this might be an overestimation, could not bring himself to ignore Reinhardt entirely. "Perhaps you're right, but we cannot afford to have any more independent power factions emerging in the court. If this is a bad seed, we must nip it in the bud. But, after all, he's merely a soldier. Next year, he will also become the head of the Lohengrin family. That is not a position to be taken lightly." "That may be so, but, Your Excellency, why have you suddenly started talking about Countess von Grunewald? Is there some reason?" The Secretary of State hesitated for a moment, before handing over a letter. The Minister of Finance glanced at it and saw a short message in the impersonal type of a word processor. G. B. What is this? Muttered Gerlach to himself, before nodding in understanding. Ah, I see. The Marquess von Benemunde is after Countess von Grunewald. You think so too? What else could it be? Gerlach grimaced bitterly. Indeed, she is quite the troublesome person. The Marquess's court life ended long ago. She should just accept the pension and retire to a quiet life in the countryside. Does she still believe she can pull the sun back into the sky after it has been set? But if the child born more than 10 years ago has lived, the Marquess would likely have been formally crowned Kaiserin. It's understandable that she can't let go, especially given. Do not say any more, Minister of Finance. Lichtenlad's tone had lost its softness. When the Marquess von Benemunde had given birth to his stillborn son, a strange rumor began to spread. It was said that the boy had, in fact, been born alive, but had been killed by the doctor, and that the doctor had been bribed with a huge sum by those who did not want the Kaiser to have a male heir. Those spreading the rumors would stop there, look around nervously, and put a finger to their lips. Their theatrics lent a strange air of authenticity to the rumor. After all, who but the Kaiser's two daughters and their husbands, Duke Braunschweig and Marquis von Littenheim, the most powerful noble families, could wish for the Kaiser to remain without a male heir? Upon hearing the rumor, the two couples were outraged, yet viewed with suspicion. Even their fury seemed questionable. Though normally sworn enemies, it was said that the two families had joined forces to find the source of the rumor, but their search proved fruitless. Then came the speculation. They didn't seriously search for the source because they knew it would lead to something they didn't want to confront in court. Power and prestige are evidently not the same as public trust. In any case, we must not meddle carelessly. If you dip your hand in boiling water, it won't just be a moment of pain. The long-term consequences could be terrifying. As Lichtenlad nodded at the Minister of Finance's words, his stern gaze seemed to pierce through the void of space. The Minister of Finance reread the unsigned letter and wondered who had written such a suspicious yet likely truthful message. If only the Crown Prince were still alive, the Minister of Finance sighed. As a capable man, both in administration and political strategy, he had a keen eye for the affairs of state. But as a bureaucrat born from a nobility, his vision never extended beyond the empire and its imperial system. He feared the weakening of the imperial system due to the Kaiser's apathy, the absence of a successor, and the infighting among the aristocracy. Yet the very collapse of the Goldenbaum dynasty and its empire was beyond his imagination. In the past, there had been overreaching ministers who disregarded the Kaiser, enriched themselves, and oppressed their fellow courtiers. But all these events had taken place on the same plate. the plate of the Golden Bomb dynasty. If he had known that the blonde-haired boy they spoke of intended to shatter the plate itself, he would either have been paralyzed with fear or dismissed it as the delusions of a fool. Although Reinhard was promoted to admiral, his position remained undecided, and for the time being, he was only given the titles of Senior Counselor to the Ministry of War and Permanent Member of the Supreme Staff Council of the Space Fleet. Both were largely ceremonial, with no substantial authority. It was clear that the military mainstream sought to give him status and honor, but without real power. Kircheis was promoted to commander, though his role as Reinhard's adjutant remained the same. While he was pleased with his promotion, there was a lingering fear that it might cause him to be separated from Reinhard, so for now he was relieved to stay by his side. Reinhard visited the Space Fleet Command to visit Marshal Muckenberger and then went to the Ministry of War, where he paid a formal visit to Marshal Ehrenberg, the Minister of War, maintaining perfect decorum. "At least the boy knows his manners, and he doesn't look bad either," remarked the elderly marshal, who wore an old-fashioned monocle. However, his monocle didn't have the ability to see through human minds, and he couldn't perceive that the extraordinarily handsome young man standing before him was already planning to oust him from his office within a few years. Reinhard had treated the marshal with the appropriate level of respect, knowing that the marshal only valued surface appearances. However, there was one honor in his promotion to admiral that Reinhard genuinely appreciated. He was given his own flagship. While the ship technically belonged to the state, it couldn't be taken from him without his consent unless he requested a change, retired, was demoted, or killed in action. Until then, it was Reinhard's. The newly built battleship Brunhild, a gleaming silver, streamlined beauty, a proud and invincible female knight. When Reinhard visited the ship with an envoy from the Kaiser, his heart soared in an instant. Brunhild, Brunhild. Reinhard repeated the name of his new flagship. He would come to love this ship more than a rider loves his steed, and for the rest of his life he would never switch to another. While stationed in the capital, with no active duties, the ship was like a jewel locked in a box. But in the near future, there would surely come a day when this brave queen would lead a fleet into battle. For that, the Empire's situation against the Free Planets Alliance would have to deteriorate. But it would be best if it was others who faced defeat. That way, Reinhardt's position would grow stronger, and he would have the opportunity to act. "I am deeply grateful for receiving such a fine ship. Please convey my thanks to His Majesty," Reinhardt said, his voice filled with a passion that transcended mere formality or calculation. The Baron serving as the envoy nodded, handed over the official documents, and whispered, "I look forward to it. before departing. The meaning of those strange words would became clear through Kircheis's explanation. Lord Reinhard, I've heard that when one is given a flagship from the Kaiser, it is customary to give the envoy a gift of thanks. A gift? Yes, because giving money would be seen as a bribe. It's usually something like a work of art. Only then will only then will your flagship be recognized by those around you. Reinhard was furious. What kind of nonsense was that? He hadn't bought the ship from the envoy. He couldn't help but raise his voice, but Kircheis remained calm. We don't live in a world where reason prevails, Lord Reinhard. That's exactly why you seek to change it, isn't it? Better to bear this minor indignity with the Baron, so that you can one day create a society where reason does prevail. Indeed, as you say, the price of one Brunhild is cheap enough. Reinhard nodded, grateful for Kircheis's advice. The next day, a famous oil painting by the artist Riet Meyer was delivered to the Baron's private residence. The Baron had little interest in art, but after receiving an explanation from the art dealer who delivered it, he was satisfied and immediately resold it to the same dealer, receiving 50,000 imperial marks in cash. Whether the painting was kept or resold was no longer Reinhard's concern. Thus, Brunhild was officially recognized as Reinhard's flagship. One day, while walking side by side aboard the ship, Reinhard turned his ice-blue eyes toward Kircheis. This ship is half yours. As a commander, you're qualified to be the captain. How about it? That would be nice. If I had your permission, my loyalty would be focused entirely on Brunhild. That would be a problem. I retract my suggestion. We'll find someone else for the captain position. I think that would be the best. But I suppose you must be eager to take this ship to the battlefield as soon as possible. Unfortunately, I don't think there will be any battles for a while. Those rebels, the so-called Free Planets Alliance, have probably satisfied their bloodthirsty urges by now. Standing on the dimly lit bridge, Reinhard gazed around. In the near colorless world, his golden hair stood out vividly. I wish a local rebellion would break out. Something easy to suppress. Reinhard spoke of dangerous matters, his expression showing that he might not be joking. If it's a convenient rebellion, it probably won't reach you, Lord Reinhard. There are plenty of others who'd be more than happy to claim easy glory. I suppose so. We'll just have to wait until they all die off. Reinhard uttered these even more dangerous words, his fearless eyes gazing into the distance.